Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose watercolor tonalist landscape painting. We're going to be working with a single pigment. This is Burnt Umber by Daniel Smith. I believe it's PBR 7. And I've been slowly going through a few of the Daniel Smith paints, experimenting with them and seeing what type of textures, what type of cats we can get directly on our completely wet watercolor paper. And yeah, thank you, Hammy, for starting it off with that. So in front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I had thoroughly saturated it with water prior to turning on the camera. Let's get some of this cat hair off of it. It's 100% cotton, 140 pound. So we're going to play around with it. We're going to do kind of an additive and subtractive process. We're going to explore the tonal values, and we're going to make up a scene as we go along. This process is adopted from painters Stuart Davies, Dennis Sheehan, and other oil painters that paint in the tonalist style, where they'll use a smooth white surface, something that's maybe gessoed. They'll mix a thinner into their oils, brush it on, wipe it off, and just go back and forth. And we're going to do that here with our watercolor. So, don't have a scene in mind. We're going to let it develop. The paper towel is going to be used to wipe back and forth. We'll scrape back and forth and see what happens there. We're not going to use the paper towel yet because in my left hand I have the hake brush, a medium Ranson hake brush. I've had it for about 4 years now, so it's thoroughly worn in. And then in my other hand, in my other arm, I have Hammy. So I think whenever I start talking during a video, that's when he's prompted to jump and try to climb onto the table, because he wasn't doing it earlier when I was messing with some other stuff. So a few things to look for, and of course you're welcome to follow along. If you don't have Daniel Smith paints, that's perfectly fine. I use Cotman brand, I use Van Gogh brand, and I use Da Vinci. And I've been playing around with the Daniel Smith to see what the fuss is about, and to see if it adds a little extra oomph to my single tube experiments. So if you want to follow along, you can use you could use ultramarine. You know, you could play around and have fun with that. But some of the things we'll look for here is to see our tonal variety, to see what type of tonal shift we get when we do a dry off, any type of granulation, to see how it lifts, and yeah, scrapeability. So far, it's not wowing me the way that the Moon Glow, which was multiple pigments mixed together, the I think it's Goethite, wowed me, and some others. But I had said a similar thing at the beginning of the Van Dyke Brown, where I wasn't really too wowed at first, and then throughout the painting, then it slowly dawned on me how important and how awesome it was. Okay, Hammy has went to go explore the art room. That will let us explore the liftability. Okay, kind of tossing that in there, and we'll use the paper towel to stamp, swipe, and lift. We'll find one spot kind of throw it in, and we could lift back to the white of the paper. I'm trying to get scientific with these and consistent from one experiment to the next. I just don't want to paint the same scene over and over again. Though it does become very easy for any landscape painter, especially if we're just painting from our mind and having fun, to start painting the same scene over and over. Sometimes we do it deliberately to explore different things, you know, maybe palettes, application, mediums. And other times it just seems to happen. And if you look at, especially our modern fast and loose painters, will put a lot of the same things out, very similar works. And it might simply just be because of the fact that with the internet we now have a lot more access to sharing what we're working on. I've been doing a lot of sketching and studying of John Singer Sargent charcoal and graphite portraits. And I think I saw one statistic where he had over 800 paintings or drawings out there. And if you think about that, for social media, if you had Facebook or Instagram, and you have an artist who uploads, I don't know, let's just say once a week, that would just take a few years to put a whole catalog up there and to see everything that happens. You'd start seeing similarities. Round the number of weeks in a year to 50, just make it easy. The 800 divided by 50, it's going to give us what, 16 years? It is summer break and I am a math teacher, but I apologize if I got the math wrong. I'm more focused on this. All right, so I'm liking the way it lays in. I do see some granulation taking place. Some areas I do have heavier application, which is pretty cool. I did like how the Van Dyke Brown had, Hammy, you can't jump on me, bud. You got to jump onto the chair. The Van Dyke Brown had very good, like kind of separation that took place, where the description says that it's a mixture of different PBR7s, and you can tell that different parts were coming out as it was being used. I hope that makes sense. I had Hammy trying to jump in my lap. He doesn't do it maliciously, but you know, with cats they try to cling on, and it's hard to paint and talk while having a cat claw in your thigh. But being a school teacher, honestly, is it that much different? Okay. So you can see the general composition taking place. We saw very easily how much it lifted in the wet and wet stage. We used the paper towel in the sky. Now we're going to play around with the #1 rigger, and we'll play around with scrapability. With this, it's kind of more just the compositional aspect, the #1 rigger, and the atmospheric feel. We're mixing a little bit of water, we're going wet and wet, and we're creating our trees. One thing that I haven't talked about in quite some time is whenever you're painting wet and wet, it's very easy to get backfills and cauliflower effects. I didn't have anything happen here, and I think that's because I used the same technique to prevent it, and I used to talk about it all the time, and I think it's probably just important that I mention what it is. If you use less water or just use more pigment, you're not going to get those backfills. You're not going to get that cauliflower effect. If we were to splatter straight water onto this, those areas would cause a cauliflower effect. So just using less water as you progress through a wet and wet will prevent that from happening. Also, wet and wet will diffuse and lighten, and this is just to give us a nice atmospheric feel and just create a sense of depth within the painting. Now, scraping wise, I have this one tool that I've been using that was given to me by another YouTuber, Mr. Mark. I use this for my harder scrapes. A harder scrape will cause a indentation damage to the paper, and that will cause a backfill. On the last Daniel Smith pigment that was used, which I think was the burnt yellow ochre, which was very kind of red, like a light red oxide, it backfilled to the point where it almost looked like pure application of the pigment. So that was interesting to see with that. So how it interacts, how the scrapes look, and how they give you tonal variation at the end, I think is important for a fast and loose painter, especially if you're just playing around with one pigment. I think I mentioned that there is granulation, but so far I'm not really wowed by it. On that note, let me find a round scraper and we'll see if we can get it to push out and to create white lines. And you can see as I apply the pressure, it's creating a thicker line, and that's creating less of an object to backfill, or a bigger object that would have to be backfilled, but so it causes difficulty and leaves the white. You could also use the sharp edge, get some there. The big takeaway with anything like that is to honestly just experiment with moisture levels on your paper and to see what can happen. Because I could pass over that right now and it would wind up filling up. A lot of the fast and loose painters will use the flat edge of a card to scrape rocks. To mention some contemporaries that are painting in this style and have videos for people to look up. You have Joe Menza. He has been adding a lot of gouache to his experiments, but he has a lot of videos out there with the scraping. You have Stephen Cronin, who has been doing it for years, and he has some books out on Amazon. Alan Owen, I'm not sure if Alan Owen scrapes, but he definitely has some good resources on YouTube. And David Usher. David Usher and Stuart Davies were I'm mixing up my names, I'm sorry. David Usher and Stephen Cronin were the first two that I really watched. And then David Usher turned me on to the Ron Ranson Facebook page, which I now help moderate admin with Joe Menza and Matthew Clemens. think there's another gentleman, Chris Varley, that's been putting out a lot of fast and loose videos. There's quite a few. But if you like this style, check out Ranson Disciples. You have a lot of people on there that paint of all levels, and everybody is very free and willing to help and share their techniques and approaches. So we saw the scrapability, we saw the lifting of the wet pigment, we saw quite a bit actually. So let's pause it, we'll do a dry off, and we'll see how it looks after there's a dry off taking place, the tonal shift. All right, so we're dried off. We did have a softening taking place, and we did have kind of a warm to cool shift where I'd say it looks more of a cooler brown than it did when it was wet. Now, burnt umber is, I think, one of the kind of go-to for sketching, watercolor sketching, under paintings for oils. It's kind of like a classic staple color, and I enjoy working with burnt umber. We're now going to pass over this and look and see how it dry brushes to see what type of tonal value we can get, the darkness that we can get with it. There's some areas that I'll try re-wetting, and we'll see how much we can get it to lift. I don't think there's really much staining power with a burnt umber, so may not be too much concern there. I'm just simply stippling in my foliage, and we could draw more trees as well. Might have been nice to leave this as a soft area, but the harshness of the scrapes I think really wouldn't have worked if I didn't have a little bit more going on around it. Some just simple horizontal swipes to create the 2D plane of water. And I haven't re-wetted the hake brush yet. This is kind of a stage that's difficult to re-wet it, because if we did, I'll show you, I re-wet it just a dab. We start, let's see, we start getting globs of water down, and it's hard to control. So we'll lift that up and out. But it's just to show you why I really try to avoid adding water to the hake throughout. If you do, just take the very corner and just kind of just gently dip it in, just to get the pigment moving if you need that to happen. Also, as you stipple, you're adding water and pigment to those spots, and if you really go heavy in that area, you can then cause that area to wet, and then you are essentially wet and wet again, which you could take advantage of and use. It's all to your preference. I have not used the number 4 rigger in a while. This summer has been a lot of just portrait practice, just kind of relaxing, but utilizing the time to delve deeper into areas that I otherwise am not exploring. Sometimes it's just easy, especially with fast and loose watercolor painting, to set up in this fashion and just relax and paint a landscape from scratch during the work week. Being a school teacher, being out for the summer, gives me more time to focus on things that, you know, after the school day, I wouldn't really have the energy to devote to it. One of the things with this fast and loose technique, especially working from tubes of paint, you find that you put out a lot of pigment, a lot of paint, and you know, sometimes the cheaper paints, the student grade paints, are more easy to come to terms with using a larger quantity of. The Daniel Smith, kind of the basic paints, like this burnt umber, yeah, for 15 milliliters is a little over $10, so let's just say $11 to make it easy. But 10 milliliters of a Van Gogh brand might be $4. So sometimes there's, you know, the monetary concern with that. And experiment, you know, see what you like. I'm experimenting with these because, you know, just to see how they compare, and also what type of textures and other granulation and mixtures I can get. That's why I've personally went on this experimental path. So I put a big tree here. And we're working on just pushing that tonal value and working over our wet and wet. The number 4, for me, the lines aren't as thin as the number 1, but it holds more pigment, and it just kind of quickens the application for me. So when you're filming on YouTube and you're trying not to take an hour for a painting, it helps out. You can take the number 1 and really have fun in there. You can tell that I've put out this paint. This is probably the 4th or 5th time. And that's the case with every pigment when working in this style. But burnt umber in general is a lot of fun. I have one video way back of looking at a monochromatic photograph. I don't know if it was a Spanish photographer. I have to look back. Somebody had shared it on a Facebook page for monochromatic photography, and I painted it and did a study of it in burnt umber and really enjoyed it. I'm just an earth tone type of guy. I was watching some silent films the other day, you know, silent films, black and white, and it was Nosferatu, which was, I think, German made, 1920s-ish. I was looking up a little bit of background on it because I was curious, because it went from like black and white to brown to sepia to red, and I was trying to figure out what that was happening. But apparently that's what they deliberately did. They were playing with those different film colors or tints. But interesting fact, I knew that it was like a copyright infringement on Dracula, even though they used a different name. They had lost the copyright, and apparently it was all supposed to be destroyed, all copies of it, but I think a few of them remained, and they kind of pieced together the movie from that. I think a lot of the old black and white silent film movies were also on flammable film that could just combust, and I think some movies are just lost to history because that had happened. But the cool thing is thinking like some of the painters that I greatly admire, or those movies, those were the influential things coming out during that time period as well. I personally think that the advent of the camera, even though people kind of often say that it had affected painting to make it more loose and more expressive because the camera could just copy what the eye would see. Excuse me, I felt that like the camera helped show some of those things about how the eye sees, how it focuses, and I think they often worked hand in hand instead of pulling it away from absolute views. I'm rambling. So at this point, I'm just seeing how dark we can get this, trying to really put this tree in the foreground here. If we want to, we could scrape some highlights into it. We can put some dark foliage to pop it forward. Help ground this tree in place. Maybe scratch this edge right here. Kind of let it sit out in front. In fact, I mentioned Matthew Clemens earlier today. He posted a nice painting today where his tree in the foreground had some really interesting scraping in it. Thin scraping that looked really nice. Hopefully soon I can do another kind of podcast Zoom meeting with them and upload that. Well, I know that this painting was supposed to be an exploration of burnt umber from Daniel Smith, and I kind of stepped away from that idea. So let's try to bring it back to that. Let's see, let's bring some dark foreground elements, just simple swipes. You can see earlier where I did calligraphy type strokes showing through. Trying to grab some pure. There you go, that's some pure pigment, pure from the tube right there. Get a variation of density. You can do a dry off in a moment, and then from there we can see, if anything, how we can lift. Let me do a quick dry off so we can see how it looks. I'm going to pause the camera. Okay, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, there's a few experiments I want to do. First is to take some clean water. This is the first time cleaning a brush this painting. And we're going to find a spot to wet. We're going to see how easily we can get back to the white of the paper in that spot. I first saw this demonstrated in a video by Stephen Cronin, and he used it to bring back the white of a sail for a ship. More aggressive brushing can take place to do that, to try to pull that pigment out, and I think that right there shows that that can happen as well. You can see that line that I pulled out. So you'll see that technique in water. This lifts easily, so there's no stainability that we really have to worry about. The second thing I want to play around with is just to see how it kind of layers and glazes. It's something I've been playing with since I started really using gamboge, the new gamboge, using it to glaze and see how it can darken spots. So let's say we want this area darkened. Right now it looks darker because of the water there. We'll see how it is with the pigment laid. Try not to pass over the spot too many times because of the liftability underneath. I'll leave a gap right there so we can try to compare that. And we'll do this in the water as well. Let's just go left to right, right in here. And we'll see how much that works. Any other spots before we do a dry off? We'll just go right along that edge. Just as a little technique just to kind of darken some values, just some spots. All right, let me pause the camera again. All right, and then coming back, you can see right here is where I did those horizontal strokes. Here's when I went over the edge, and here's the vertical with the spot that I didn't hit. So it did darken up those spots. And I think any pigment will do that. Just something I want to start using as a technique, and I use that here. So I'm going to do a few more marks on it, and then I'm going to wrap it up. What I will say is this, you are always welcome. Sorry, Hammy just jumped on me again. You're always welcome to follow along with anything that I do in any one of these videos. You are more than welcome to sign your own name to anything you do when you follow along with one of these. I want you guys to be successful and you know, have money for art supplies and to progress and have fun. I encourage you guys to give away or to sell your works that you do when you follow along. That being said, if you want to support this channel, liking and subscribing really helps. I also have a whole bunch of links down below where I have the Patreon, I have the Ko-fi, and other means of donating to this channel. And those will come with, you know, extra perks, like extra resources and extra videos. Though I do try to maintain a lot of just free content. So, oh, Hammy, you're popping up again? There you go, Hammy. It's dark on this side of this tree. So that being said, you know, I want you guys to be successful, and I really want to just do what I can to help promote the arts and help the art community. We'll do a few more marks. We'll do a dry off, and then we'll sign it. Here's where I pulled that one spot. We'll do a little sideways dry brushing. I mentioned Alan Owen earlier. He is just the absolute master of just like a simple mark that looks so easy with that side brush, and it's just it has to be just years of practice for him to achieve that. Kind of a living master from that era. Same with David Usher. I just want to say living master. You know, same with Stuart Davies, Dennis Sheehan, all living masters. a little bit of scraping, a little bit of texture. All right, our last dry off, and then we'll sign. So I'm really pleased with this. I'm pleased with the result. I feel like maybe I should be doing a side-by-side comparison between this and maybe another brand's burnt umber, because I'm just a huge fan of burnt umber to begin with. But I'm really happy with it. I have some raw umber that I'm going to use for a future monochromatic, and then from there I'll do a 2-tube painting with the burnt umber and the raw umber, which I absolutely love that combination, and we'll see how it works for this brand. But I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, comments, anything I missed, let me know down below, and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. Bye.